Welcome to Wear Your Cape to Work, a podcast hosted by Project Insight. We believe that project and program managers are the real superheroes of every organization. They wear their capes to work every day, and we want to celebrate them. Our guests on the podcast are project professionals who have poured their superpowers into driving successful projects across different industries. We want you to hear their stories so you can be inspired to wear your own cape to work. Our guest on the show today is Kevin Perkins. He's been a technical product manager for so many years. He joined CEO Steve West from Project Insight, and the two are going to talk about where project management was 20 years ago, where it is today, and where they think it's headed in the future. Can we trust Kevin's take on the future? I think so. His superpower happens to be seeing the big picture, understanding product development, and leading the way before anybody else is ready for that tech. Hey, thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Great to see you guys. It's always a pleasure. I'm really glad that you asked me to fill in today.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you on the podcast. Wear Your Cape to Work is a good one for you. You have worn your cape to Project Insight for work, which is awesome. Just for the rest of our audience, Kevin was employed with Project Insight for a number of years. What's the number? Does anybody know the number? 5?
Yeah, 5 or 6, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So more than a handful of years, and really made a big dent in all of the good things that we're doing at the company. I met you just after that because I kind of assumed some really big shoes that you left behind and took on some of your marketing from that point. So that's kind of the history for the two of us. But Steve, maybe you want to introduce how you met Kevin and how he came to be a part of Project Insight, or if you knew him before that, how that all was.
Oh, definitely. I mean, both Kevin and I, we both are, Gen Xers who grew up constructing the internet. We, basically when I graduated from University of Michigan, right into 1995, we were building web apps and websites. And I had met Kevin through a business group, probably right in the 90s, I'm guessing it was, because we were doing all kinds of crazy web development projects and startups and all that stuff back then.
So you met him in 1990, well before he came to work for you.
Well, in the late 90s, yeah, well before then, because Kevin's we're both entrepreneurs. At the time in the late 90s, I was building web apps for people. Our company was a software development firm for .com prospectors. We were literally like selling the axes and the picks and the shovels to get the web apps done that people, all the nutty ideas people had, in addition to things that are still used today with corporate companies. But and I know he was doing similar things, and of course we then obviously ended up making Project Insight later on, and then he ended up making a couple different products as well, and we were in a common business group.
Well, let me dovetail, Steve, because here's the thing. Like clearly, yeah. So to augment what you're saying, we definitely were the early entrepreneurs. When the internet was born, it's like, how do you make a web page? Well, you got to learn how to code HTML, right? Like, there's no, no classes. There's no CS degrees. There's no, kind of we're the generation of like, we went from answer machines to voicemail to bulletin boards to AOL to so we had to learn ourselves through this entire process. And so clearly there was a small little community that kind of knew each other and leveraged each other. How do you do this? How do you code database connectivity, et cetera? And so we come to find out too, like, I was body surfing the south side of the Huntington Pier on a huge day one day, and I think were you on the pier and you're like, hey, I know that guy or something, or I don't know.
I'm sure. Well,
there's some like, wait, I know you, and you're like, I'm gonna get my suit on, and you're like, anyway, it was just one of those kinds of situations where we not only had really tight professional continuity, but personally too, we just had such a great time with each other that it was just the building blocks of some authentic great relationships. So I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
just want to point out to our audience who's listening that if you were watching the video podcast, you'd see that Kevin's literally standing in front of a giant wave, a green room. It looks a pretty big blue, but a blue-green room behind him. And
Yep.
Steve's got his surfboard. So nods to the swimming, nods to the pier, nods to the body, and the board surfing that brought you two together. Kevin,
Hmm.
you did not start out in project management because project management wasn't really a platform at that time. You both were more in development, IT software, and website building. What led you to project management ultimately?
Yeah, that's a really long journey, I think maybe, but just to kind of harken back to what we were just talking about, when you're learning as you go, there's not like this formalized, we're going to set up a project plan. And I think, and Steve, you probably could agree with this. There's probably tons of people over the years, when we first started out, that were trying to do these really elaborate waterfall projects, using,
Hmm.
whatever tools, Excel or, Microsoft Project or whatever. But like really at the end of the day, with how fast things moved in the early internet, there wasn't a whole lot of time for planning, A, and B,
Yeah.
this is how I think the concept of agile was really born,
Mm.
out of necessity. It was just like, in the environment of like either creating stuff that needed to be monetized or creating stuff to be venture capital invested or whatever, it was like kind of this free for all. And if you watched any of those like Steve Jobs, movies about Apple or whatever, that was really a thing, back in the day. So the journey from being kind of scattered to being really formally, planned out, and how where Project Insight is today of being so developed in the
Hmm.
portfolio management. That's like literally why it's taken so long, so many like 20 years really to get to where we're at. There wasn't, like I said, this like switch you could
Yeah.
just turn on and it was all what you're saying.
For our guests, that's why we wanted to have Kevin
Yeah,
here today and Steve too. Like, let's remember, let's reminisce, let's go back to how far we've come in this journey.
that's right.
Because if you know where you've been, you know where you are, you can face forward and know where you're going. So that's the whole conversation today, is this superpower of self placement. I
Mhm.
understand myself at this big picture, high level. Where have we been? Where are we going? And that can be from the goals of your company, or it can be from project
Mhm.
management and what you're capable of doing in that realm also. So Steve, what do you want to add something about what things
Well,
looked like
yeah,
way back
definitely. I
when?
mean, right. I mean, I ultimately was brought to project management because I'm running this development firm, and not only am I developing, but I'm also helping, selling services and then managing the projects, because even, these entrepreneurs, or, we're entrepreneurs, but they are as well. They want this software done yesterday. And so there's a constant need to keep them up to date, keep them in the loop. And of course, I remember obviously when you go to college, it was like, oh, you should get email, right? Email was the thing. Yeah, people were using Microsoft Project and Excel, but you still had a list of things you got to do. The customer wanted to know when it was going to get done, and you're emailing them the files or printing them out or showing them, and that's what the tools were at that time, and that was like super high tech, right? We don't have the web apps yet. We're making web apps, but there's no web apps, not very many yet, specific in the early 90s or mid 90s. Later on, of course, then you started seeing people make tools like we were making extra nets so that the customers could get stuff. And
Hmm.
sometimes that was a challenge, because even though these entrepreneurs are having great ideas for digitizing their businesses, they maybe aren't familiar with the idea that you can even like use a browser for anything other than their idea that they had. Right.
Yeah, a lot of people. Let's make sure the context is clear. In the early
Yes, please.
.com era, you're talking about a lot of client server type of applications. You get a
Yeah.
floppy, you put it in your little computer, install, and then you have this
Yes.
application on your machine that either did work locally and stored files locally, or it used like your modem to send information somewhere. but there was not this like cloud idea. So Steve, I remember when
Yes.
we were kind of just getting going, I remember Steve and I both were just pretty much on the cutting edge of this, especially with the concept of extranets and being able to take, company intranet doings and then exposing it externally to partners, to vendors and employees and stuff like that. And that was a huge, I mean, speaking for myself, that was a huge part of my business back in the late 90s and probably the early 2000s, was just getting companies up to speed for that stuff. So as it relates to like, project and the way that project management has evolved, people were like, well, wait a minute, I don't have to have it on my machine. I can put these
Right.
project plans into the extranet. I can put, so that starts yet a whole nother conversation that
Yes.
in the next 10 years of like, well, what's the best way to share information? What's the best way to chrome things so that this person sees that slice of the data, that person sees
Hmm.
that slice of the data. And it's been a remarkable transformation. Like I said, it wasn't like it was just all laid out and you just follow the game plan. And here we are 20 years later, you to figure this stuff out in real time.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I
some of that
mean,
competitive scene, sorry, Steve, to interrupt, but some of that competitive landscape is what brought some of those great features and functionality to fruition, right? You started out with this, now you want to go here. I mean, what was the big tool in the beginning, and where did that go with competitors and what people wanted to do?
yeah, I mean, I just want to jump in. There
Yeah.
wasn't a tool. I mean, we're talking many different things over the years have been introduced and either stayed or not stayed. And as we develop this conversation, you're gonna find that there's more and more tools coming online. But I mean, I can sit there and remember front page was a big deal for a little while, and then
Mm.
of course like the Yahoo and AOL instant messengers. I mean, we all sit here and think, oh, Microsoft Teams and Slack. Well, those are not the first chats. I mean, of course,
Hmm.
even AOL and Yahoo and all those chats weren't the chats. And the funny thing is, the conversation back then was, should we even let our employees use these things? Now look at us. Everybody's chatting everywhere they
Yeah.
go. And it's just so funny how what's perceived as maybe a negative with one generation, the other generation comes in and is totally upends it. And luckily for us, I mean, even though we're now older, we've always been changing with the times,
Oh, yeah.
so it
Yeah.
wasn't like we've never had this idea that, oh, I should just stay with what I know. If you did that, you wouldn't have moved from the Commodore to the Apple to the PC. That you
Or
know
you wouldn't have moved from HTML to .NET or to,
right, yeah.
Angular or whatever. It's just like it's the
Mhm.
next thing. And that's really, I think, the hallmark of Steve and my generation is that it's like, ooh, what's that? Well, let's see if that's applicable. And we don't necessarily have to become, the experts in that specific thing. Although there's kind of that push towards you're a database administrator, you're a programmer or whatever, you're a full stack person or whatever. But I mean, from a creator perspective or an entrepreneurial technologist, if you will, it's like Steve and I both were the types of guys that would say like, I wonder if I could make that application mobile. Would it work in this
Mm.
environment? And
Yeah.
and would it work internally? And how does it work externally? So these are the bigger questions that we would have to solve that honestly there was no blueprint for any of that kind of stuff. And
Yeah, yeah, and that brings up my question. Why don't you tell us about how we've talked about the beginning of project management in the .com days, but one big memory of mine of a product that you developed was Squeezer.
yeah.
So, you just mentioned
Yeah.
mobile, but you were way ahead with that app.
Yeah, almost too far ahead. So okay, so in the late 90s, I had this kind of this concept, with building, like you were saying, web applications for people. I had created like a strike team. So I had about 5 or 7 people, everybody from database people to developers, and we would go in and either fix people's problems or they would want a shopping cart, which now
Mm.
is completely commoditized. But at the time, it was like, yeah, let's build them an extranet, a shopping cart, or whatever,
Mhm.
content management system, those kinds of things. And those were really advanced things. And as you mentioned, Steve, tools like Front Page and Visual Studio started to pop up, where there was, anybody and their grandma could kind of figure out, the sort of the next gen pretty quickly, pretty adeptly. So it was forcing, me to like constantly innovate and constantly do the next thing. I saw those little, devices, the little HP Jornadas, the HP iPac, or excuse me, the compact iPacs. And they were really interesting to me because they had a mobile version of Windows on there and a browser. And I was like, a browser? How does that work? I've got like this little Palm Pilot, but how does it connect to anything? Do I have to be on Wi-Fi? There's no radio that can talk to the general, the public networks. So that just be, I could see like, wow, that's going to be a really interesting technology. And so I invented a technology that was like a transcoding engine that was essentially able to take large scale web pages and distill them down to fit like 98% of the devices in the marketplace. So anything from like a candy bar phone that used WAP all the way to like, a Blueberry, a BlackBerry, type of phone. So it's more of the higher end. So anyways, it would take all these web pages and reconstruct them so that they would work on these. And again, this is all pre-iPhone, where full browsers and full internet capability came on the scene in like 2008, 2009, whatever. But so that technology was like way ahead, right? And being like, okay, well, we found a solution. We've searching for problems. There weren't a lot of those problems yet, so we had to kind of pivot a lot of different times. And as the industry started to catch up and everything, we had some success. We were able to license the software as a service to Yahoo, T-Mobile, Orange, IAC, which is like the Ask Jeeves search engine. If any old timers remember that one from back in the day. So then the iPhone came around and that really disrupted everything. But the interesting thing about that is for an entrepreneur to be able to like understand, okay, you don't just create stuff and it sells itself. You have to learn how to market. You have to learn how to create business plans. You have to be able to pitch to venture capitalists and people and be able to, manage resources and employees. And it was like this like crash course, PhD level crash course in, starting and running a business from scratch. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I ended up. I was lucky to exit, kind of break even. And I just kept consulting and doing other things after that. But the whole time, Steve and I sort of stayed in touch. And I think, Steve, at one point, you and I like talked. You guys were gonna hire me, I think, to like come up with a game plan for Project Insight. And this was like, I don't even remember, like 2010 or something.
I think we had a number of special projects that I think you worked for us on over the years. But I just remember Squeezer because at the time, nobody had responsive design on their websites, but the phone started to emerge and people wanted to go browse the web. And what his tech did, which was awesome, is basically responsify dynamically a website, like almost like a proxy server would for users so that you could actually read a web page before you had an iPhone. Right. So that had to have been a really cool project to not only conceive, but build and then, do all those.
Well, and it's funny too, because like I thought I knew so much about programming and HTML, and then you start getting into like okay, well, not everybody follows those rules. Not everybody codes the way they're supposed to. So you have to not only code create this transcoding engine that can parse the way it's supposed to be, but then all the screw ups and all the things that happen outside of the exigencies, as I call them, the way people don't code properly and to still be able to render it, because at the end of the day they're looking at your service as being the one that displays it in the device, and if it wasn't working, then it wasn't working. It's your fault, not the web page's fault. You can't put a little label on there that says, sorry, this web page wasn't to our standards, so we couldn't transcode it for you. You had to make that. So it was really cool to kind of get real deep with just internet protocols, just the kind of why they built the internet the way they did it, and the kind of patterns that evolved over time. It was really a great process for sure.
Well, and the funny thing
Steve,
about
you
that
should
is,
talk.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, the funny thing about what you just said about knowing how the internet works is that for, the benefit of most people out there. The nuts and bolts of it have not changed in almost 40 years now since they released, almost, I guess 35 or 36 years. The nuts and bolts of everything that you see on the web is using the same protocols that were set up early on. And we don't know that because it's so abstracted from users, but it's something that, not everybody gets to look at every day.
I want to bring you back to Project Insight just for a little segue, Steve, and Kevin, you'll be able to witness this too. Actually, I should back up. I'm backing up my train. What I want for people to notice is that Kevin's really a project manager, but more a product manager. You can already feel it as we're talking to you, this like entrepreneurial spirit that leads someone down product management. Like, I'm just going to embrace this now and where this product can go. And this visionary mindset is really your superpower, I think. Not just placement in the scheme of what happened, what's here, what's next, but that vision for a product, even dropping a product and moving to the next product is something you've had a real strength in. And so, Steve, Kevin's going to witness what you say about Project Insight, but maybe, talk about what was needed back then for project management and maybe, 5 or 10 years ago and what's needed now and how that's changed.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started building Project Insight, when we were, obviously the foundation of that is making a private website that you can go to and log in. And we're talking like 2001, 2002. People didn't even know that you could do that, right? I mean, Facebook didn't exist yet, and Amazon really hadn't taken off yet that much. People knew about search engines, but people hadn't. There still was this contention between: are we going to be in a desktop world that's connected to the internet, or are browsers actually going to be able to do this, where you can like use the browser to? Because the browsers weren't really that good yet, and JavaScript wasn't that good yet. So, and in the beginning, it was sharing files and building schedules and having task lists and checklists and things like that. And the early adopters, the people that really wanted to use these kinds of tools, could benefit from that, because before you're just emailing stuff around, and that's, clearly not efficient.
No.
Yeah.
I'd like to add
spreadsheets,
to,
right?
oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
spreadsheets. People still do all that now. That's what, to this day, those techniques aren't going away. And, so you would, let's say it was 2005, you might be using a tool like Project Insight or one of the other tools out there, because let's face it, that project management tools aren't consolidating, they're growing, and they're not gonna stop growing. It's going to be more and more tools because people are digitizing more and more. But to this day, many of our customers come in with, oh, I had to do it in a spreadsheet, and they still email them as attachments. And that's just super 1990s. So.
Yeah, let's talk about what you're saying, the expansion of how many project management solutions there are out there. Maybe anybody have any insights on the why, or, where the diversification happens as we go forward here now?
I'll start, and then Kevin can correct me. But my belief is, like, even really structured disciplines like selling, CRM, and accounting, those tools are proliferating. And I remember one time I was doing a speech, and someone's like, why would you want to get into, like, this is probably 2003, why would you want to get into project management? Microsoft just bought such and such thing. The game's over. And I'm like, okay, I guess I should quit and just, give up. But they were super wrong. And even in really heavily disciplined things like accounting or whatever, there's a million tools out there for that and growing. And there are some big players that a lot of people go to, but collaboration and project management is not as structured, and different people do things in all different ways, and people cobble tools together to get things done. You got your SharePoint and your Teams, or you got your SharePoint and your Slack, and you got, Project Insight might be in the mix, or like you might, mash that all up. And more tools are coming out on the market, and I don't know that that's a bad thing, because more and more people keep coming in and wanting to do more things with their project management and digitizing things. Because like I said, even today, thousands and millions, I should say, companies still just use the basics, and they don't go online.
Yeah. What do you think, Kevin?
So, it's funny you talking about this. I recall a memory where in our CEO roundtable group, the CEOs every month or whatever, there'd be a chosen person to present their offering and what they
Mm,
were looking for, and that would solicit feedback from the group. And it was Steve's turn, and I remember,
right.
and he went and just like completely like wowed everybody. But I was left with this notion, and again, this was like mid 2005, 2006, something like that. And I'm like, well, Steve, it's great software. It looks just like a online version of Microsoft Project. Like, is that gonna be like, why would like, to Steve's point just a second ago, it's like, why would I care? I think I was feeling so like, ugh, why would I care? Like, that's dumb. Like, we'll put it online. The reality is, though, is the doing of the project isn't just like a small scintilla of the actual work a product or a project or a portfolio manager is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Steve was positioned super great, especially going into the teens. And when I came on, it was, with mobility and this
Mm-hmm.
notion of people wanting to create and share. Now it was like, oh, not only does he have the best of breed of like the PMI techniques
Mm-hmm.
inside of this application, but now we have this sort of greenfield to create this application marketplace to have all this interoperability with the best of breed technologies, CRM,
Mm-hmm.
accounting, storage, everything that you could possibly think of. And the notion is that not everybody's going to be a PMI certified project manager, right? You're going to have
Yep.
people that were hired as an assistant that are now in charge of making sure that certain tasks are getting done. They like to do it in Outlook using tasks or whatever. Boom, we just create an Outlook connector and it funnels in. And so we having this system already in place to be able to create this funnel of being able to pull in all these different things. And listen, I gotta say, like, one of the really cool things Steve and the boys ever did, I thought, was connecting to the development workspace. So
Mm-hmm.
as you talk
Yep.
about project management in terms of like managing esoterically different business units or whatever, and people, and there's budgets and stuff like that. Well, that's one way of doing project management. But when you're doing it with software, that's a whole different animal, right? You've got
Mm-hmm.
the development team is an agile team. They're using estimates. They're kind of in this like, well, I'm not really sure it's going to be this many story points or whatever. And the next thing you know, you're like, as a project manager, like, can you help me out here? Because I don't know what 10 story points means.
Right.
Help me out here. What does that look like? And
Mm-hmm.
so Steve and I both really put a lot of brain power into this, and Steve just and a few of the other guys took it to a whole nother level of being able to connect to Jira and being able to pull in epics and story points and being able
Right.
to convert those,
Mm-hmm.
because every software project, regardless of what anybody says, starts as an agile project but ends up as a waterfall project. You have to hit a deadline, you have to make your budget, and you have to deploy and start selling. So Project Insight, was really well crafted to be able to do those things. And to this day, I think that's maybe one of your best accomplishments, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, executives do want to know what the heck's going on, and they don't want to have project managers. This gets back to what we were saying before: is that if a team is already using like Jira and they're great at it and they're doing their job well and the manager is happy, then why should you force them to go out of one tool and another tool and consolidate? So our vision has always been allow them to stay in there, because and then attach or overlay our system on top of that, where we're either sending stuff into there, like sending tasks down from our tool into there, or just ingesting theirs. And so then a project manager doesn't have to like go hunt down one software system and then another software system
Mm-hmm.
and then another software system. And guess what they usually make when they have to do that? A spreadsheet. And
Right,
the
to
reason
manage it
for
all.
all this, right? And the reason for all this is the executives are funding this stuff. They want to know what's going to be done, when is it going to be done, how much is it going to be, and for some reason, software management and executive management, that's a big clash. It's even now that exactly, and so that what we decided to do was make our integrations work, not just like, oh, we're just going to send it to Zapier and hope it works, but really tightly integrate and weave that together so that our tool and the Jiras and the DevOps or, other different project management systems too, that those tools data is now replicated in Project Insight for the overlay. And this is what I was talking about before, is that the tools are going to grow and be connected together and woven together, not like, oh, there's going to be one software system that everyone's going to do all projects in and every other vendor out there is going to die. That's just not going to ever happen.
Yeah. And you guys have done a great job for our project management listeners, because I saw Kevin put his fist together. For those of you who are listening, you didn't see it. But when Steve was talking about clashing, Kevin put one fist against another and was saying, here's my dev team, here's my, C-suite or stakeholder team, and they want to know the information. But the reality is there's a project manager between those two fists, and they're having to take and connect the tech part of the company with the business part of the company.
Right.
And Project Insight's goal is to give superpowers to those project managers to say, hey, look, we're going to overlay these systems so that you don't have to do this manually. We're going to reduce the number of hours. We're going to make you more efficient. And I'm going to move my chair, but I'm swiveling from right to left. Like, you get this total verb problem of swivel chair between those applications. So that's where we're going. But that's today. Like, that you can have today. What are we going to have tomorrow? I want to hear you both talk about that before we end our episode. But where are we headed in this crazy world of project, product, program, portfolio, all the P's management, do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously the big gorilla out there right now is the large language model AIs. And so, at Project Insight, we're obviously investing in that, as is many other vendors. And I think you'll see us being able to really leverage that technology to help speed. I mean, because let's just face it, what is a project management tool? Like, our vision is that we are here to make a project manager's life easier through automating their job, like a self-driving car, right? Well, that's what we've been doing since the beginning, right? At the minute we started building something online, it was to reduce the wasted time of a PM having to go down in person and meet somebody, that making it online, the customer or whomever can collaborate and see what's supposed to go on. And then, of course, over the years, we've integrated with Microsoft Teams and DevOps and Jira and stuff to streamline the work so that the PM isn't like wasting time on things. Then they can focus on the ROIs and the KPIs and the more important aspects of project management. Well, things that they do now is building a WBS and making their templates. Well, the AI can actually help fill out those templates. And this is just kind of the easy low-hanging fruit that the AI engines can do. Down the road, it's going to be probably a lot more sophisticated, where especially if you this is where aggregating your data is critical. The more data that we have historically, we can now then use that and project things. Like, right now, we already can do capacity planning really well in our tool, but we'll be able to take that to the next level in that maybe we'll pre-populate that data for you from historical data with some AI deep analysis of that beyond just like regular static algorithms. So that's just one thing. I'm sure Kevin has more ideas.
I know. I want to hear.
Yeah, my sense of AI is, I've been really honestly a bit skeptical up until like maybe the last 6 or 8 months, just because how many times have we've ridden this fan wave of like the latest and greatest, right, Steve? Where it's like, and it turns out being kind of a dud. And really, the dud makes it be like, well, we can't get there until we actually have infrastructure to support that thing. So, in a sense, it kind of came true with the whole like, hey, well, in order for us to have AI, we need to have data centers, we need to have storage, we need to have energy, and blah, blah. But that being said, as far as the vision, if I was going to paint it for projects, I would say that 2025 is going to be the year of the agent. I'm not sure if the audience is familiar with this term. I was actually up doing my day trading super early, and I was watching the CFO for Open AI, and she was talking about agents. And it's, today when you go to a site and, it's that little chatbot that pops up and it's like, how can I help you today? And you start typing something in and it knows what you're trying to ask based off of, whatever, however you trained it or whatever, questions that you want to try to answer. That's not what I'm talking about. The idea of an agent being an asynchronous, offline utility that can actually be a deployable resource. So think about it. So as a project manager, you got a tool and there's all the potential AI, interface enhancements like Steve's talking about, like, hey, I want to hey AI, I want to make a project that is a software project that's going to last me 18 months. I have 5 people, 2 offshore, blah 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 blah. Can you and then it goes blah, 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 and it like makes that,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of the obvious infrastructure version of AI. The second form of AI that I think is like, hey AI, looks like we're going to have problems in December when 4 of my 5 guys are going to be offline for the holidays. How should I adjust the schedule? Or better yet, should I be hiring somebody to not replace them, but to, whatever, right? And then you get into kind of this now next gen of the enterprise as to how it impacts the project, right? And I think that sort of deployable resource is almost like the way a project manager today has a team. And it's just like, hey Cheryl, can you look up the rates for hiring .NET programmers for me, and then schedule 4 interviews that I want to hire somebody by next Thursday, right? And so Cheryl goes off and she does that thing, and you know what? AI is going to be doing that for you, right? So I think as a project manager, there's going to be this sort of ancillary language that people are going to start to need to learn to be able to effectively do that, because there just aren't going to be the same amount of human resources to do the basic tasks, right? But at the same time, AI is probably going to fill in a good chunk of the percentage of those gaps. And then the third thing I think for AI for me is that, if I'm a company that, is deploying out certain sets of projects and parameters and stuff like that, you could be looking at it from a marketing lens as well, right? So you could say, what was the effectiveness of rolling out our project? So project's complete. Now you're doing the aftermath, the follow-ups, right? You're doing the net scoring. You're doing all that. What's our rating? How effective was this? How many complaints did we have? Blah 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 blah. And so you deploy it in a way that augments the work that was done in terms of how it impacts the organization. And today, you probably could do some of that, here and there, but again, it's sort of like the spreadsheets and task lists and emails. It's sort of this disparate, kind of mound of AI, right? Eventually, what we're doing today is going to morph into more of a, what's needed to be done kind of a thing that's built into the product. And so some folks are going that direction. It's way early. I don't think it's going to be around for a few years, but I think with visions like that, and I've heard other people kind of talking in similar, I think you're going to see a bit more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, definitely think the trick is as a developer of a tool for us, all of the things you talked about can be done, manually, but we just are going to be able to, like we were talking about before, weaving these AI engines into something useful to the PM that isn't manually adjusted. But I know for a fact that you can today even go into ChatGPT or any of these other tools and give them those parameters and get at least a jump start on importing your work breakdown structure or taking your data and analyzing it. But of course, also all of the security questions and the privacy questions come into play as well. So you're right. I think it's early still. It's hard to say exactly what that's going to look like, but for sure, there's going to be engagement in that direction.
But Kevin is your guy to follow, everyone. If I'm going to drop his links in the chat. I mean, if you want to follow what's new and what's up and coming and what's probably around the corner, if I had to put money on someone's vision for things, it's definitely Kevin. He's been running ahead of the train for a long time. We've seen it in so many ways. So Kevin, I'll share your LinkedIn profile for people to follow you. How about your podcast? Can I share Social Nostra? Anywhere else that we can follow what you're thinking?
Oh man. You know what? You know what? Right now, I'm just available on LinkedIn. So if anybody's interested to connect, I'm happy to, talk about anything. As it's bouncing ideas and potential
Mhm.
engagements, whatever. Let's just connect. I'd love to meet
Yeah.
people and outgoing like that. So let's
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
let's.
and on the pickleball court too, right? They can find you there. Crown
Or
Pickleball
in
if
the
you want to follow
ocean
us.
or in the
Yeah, right
That's
in the
pool.
right. That's
ocean.
right.
That's
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
trying to find
But
some good balance of life, guys. So, anyways, yeah, appreciate you having me
yeah.
on today. It's been really great.
No, it's great. I love talking shop with you, and always great to hear your really awesome ideas and be able to riff them back and forth. So
Likewise.
definitely going to keep doing that until we can't do it anymore, which will be like when I'm dead.
Well,
Exactly.
this is what
Exactly.
happens. That chemistry happens, and this is where great ideas are
This is
invented.
where
So,
good,
Kevin,
authentic relationships make the most sense, folks.
it sure
Yeah.
does. It sure does. We're so glad to have you on. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing, both of you, your history of where things have been and where they're going. And it's really exciting to talk like this. And I hope our project management community agrees that there's fun things ahead. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today on the Wear Your Cape to Work podcast, hosted by Project Insight. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, follow, or leave us a comment. If you subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or other favorite podcast channels, you'll receive notifications of all of our new episodes. We'd also love it if you would share Wear Your Cape to Work with your network of PMPs or anyone else who might enjoy the show. Project Insight is an online project and portfolio management software that helps companies connect project data from across all of their teams and software tools so that they can make confident decisions about their business. Our website is projectinsight.com, and there you can find many resources for project professionals, including free PDU webinars, as well as a place to register for a demonstration or a consultation with one of our success teams. Thank you once again for joining today's conversation, and most importantly, thanks for wearing your cape to work.